Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Scott.
I'm Shatay, and we're the Hazes.
Welcome to the Love Haze podcast, where we talk about those unspoken hard parts of life. We love to process out loud what most people experience in silence.
That's right, babe. This podcast is for people like us who want to disrupt the cycles and mindsets and behaviors that no longer serve them so that they can lead healthier, freer, more fulfilling lives.
Amen.
Yes.
Life is out here just doing what it wants to do, y'all.
Always.
And there's nothing we can really do about it.
Mm-hmm.
But what would it look like if we just accepted that, learned how to go with the flow, and really just grow through it?
Yeah.
Join us as we process through it today. Welcome back to our Black Love Journey. Let's get into this thing.
Let's go.
So, Mrs. Hayes.
Yeah.
How do we get here?
Yeah. I had a Rihanna moment there. This was actually your idea, first of all, even though I'm doing the setup. And his words, response, verbatim, y'all, when I said, why are we talking about this? Where'd you get this from? He said, because our life.
Right.
The end, period. Our life. We already talked about this last episode. And I think it was from the perspective of, we mentioned life is just lifing and sort of like process through the haze of like life just lifing. And it sort of had a tone of like life was happening to us, right? And like how to make it through when life is happening to us. This conversation is putting us more in, I don't want to say a seat of control because we're trying to overcome our control issues, but sort of in a way that we are partnering with life and not falling victim to all the things that are just happening to us and all the ways that we're feeling stretched thin. And so you hear things like healing isn't linear, success isn't linear, weight loss isn't, nothing's linear, but none of that is linear because life is not linear. Like you said in the intro, it's going to do what it wants to do, right? You heard the things like tell God your plans and like, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Right.
Because there's an element of like, we can plan everything out and plan to get from point A to point B. And then actually it's going to look like,
all over the place.
That. And so we hear things like, when life throws you lemons, make lemonade. And one of the colloquialisms that I really like that from my friend and mentor, my previous leader, she says things like steer with the ice. So if you're trying to go this way, and the ice is like, you're veering somewhere else, instead of trying to like control it and go back, how can you steer with it and sort of find your way that way? And so I think this conversation is really more about like, how can we be co-collaborators with life and not feel like, oh, I'm just, whatever happens, I just got to, figure it out and deal with it. But, just how to have a little bit more ownership in the way that life is happening. So let's start with our own lives. Like, how has life shown you that it's not linear? What you done been through, basically.
All how much time you got? I think in all the ways. I think one of the things that I found for myself is that we plan in a linear way.
Yeah.
We plan to be good students, go off to college, get our degree, get a good career, buy our first car, get married, buy our first home, have babies, all these things. And we plan, for things to happen, just like that.
Chronologically.
Exactly. And then even, what you were saying earlier, just about, and then life happens to us. And so even along the line of colloquialisms, I've had to learn to I've been forced to take on the perspective that life is happening for us and not to us. But that means that none of this stuff is happening in a straight line.
Yeah.
There are things that I thought that I had figured out and I was ready to go from point A to point B and then from point B to point C. And then something happened that like, I took 2 steps forward and 3 steps back, and I found myself back at point B and having to do some reworking around that. And life has just continued to show up for me in that way and showing me that even though I think I'm done over here, there's still some more work to be done in this way,
Mm.
or at this point that I have to go back, something that I missed, something that I got to go back and rework. Even as recent as last week with this reemergence of COVID,
Yeah.
I thought we were done with masks at my job. I threw my whole box of masks away that was in my desk. I was like, oh, we're done with that. And we've been free of masks for about a little over 6 months at the job. And then we had 3 veterans and 4 staff come up positive. And
Mm.
all of a sudden we were back to this mask mandate.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, I thought we were done with
Yeah.
COVID. And the thing about it is that we're having to learn that COVID is probably going to be like the flu.
Mhm.
It's always going to be here. We will have to get annual shots, like we get flu shots. So it'll be COVID boosters and all this kind of stuff. And we're having to learn that we're going to have to put this thing that we never planned for into our plan now, into
Mhm.
the way that we provide healthcare for our veterans is going to have to be a part of like our ongoing health initiatives, things that we hadn't planned for. We had planned for things to be moving along, post COVID, and here it is back. And this understanding that people gonna get COVID every now and then,
Mm.
and it like through everything else, we had to go back and go to virtual for some stuff that we have been doing in person, all of that. But life happened to us in much the same way where we had, our plan for babies and all this other kind
Mhm.
of stuff. And we had been,
Mhm.
been up, around, over the river, through the woods, and
Sure.
no babies are here. And we're
Yeah.
having to figure out what life looks like in this moment,
Yeah.
um, with redefining what family is going to be for us.
Mhm.
And it just hasn't been a straight line. And in all things, life is teaching us that it isn't linear. You have to learn how to um, deal with life and
Mhm.
understand that it's not going to be a straight line.
Mhm.
What about for you?
Man, so many things. Like, how much time
Mm-hmm.
will it take for me to say all of these things? One of the first thoughts I had was uh being married. I remember almost the moment where I was when I thought the thought. I was around 15 in high school, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, how naive. I remember thinking around 15, like I probably like be married and have kids at 25. And I remember feeling at 15 that 25 was old. Do you know what I mean? Like it felt
Mm-hmm.
like a seasoned adult.
Mm-hmm.
And do you know how old I was when I got married?
No, I wasn't. I'm not sure.
38, y'all. I was 38. Do you know how many relationships happen between 15
Yeah.
and 38? And, great moments and really not great moments, and just the who I became in the midst of all of that. And then to your
Mm-hmm.
point, no babies yet. So I had planned for 25,
Mm-hmm.
38. Okay. My career, chose a major in college, and in my defense I didn't choose according to like what lit me up. Fortunately
Mm-hmm.
I found my way to psychology, and that was really great. And then what the heck was my career, like how
Right.
I have such a career and a body of work that I'm so proud of. How the heck did I get here?
Mm-hmm.
Thank God I just trusted myself and followed my heart and my intuition to build something.
Mm-hmm.
But my gosh, is not what I went to school for. I went to
Yeah.
school for a psych on a pre-med track. Took the MCAT and was like, I don't want to do
No, thank you.
this. Right. Went to LA, dance career. And then even then I was like, the goal was like, I want to dance with Beyonce. And that didn't happen, but I did a ton of great projects, lots of theater. And like my career evolved as I evolved, which is not something people talk about.
Right.
And, I had only seen models of people who went to school or didn't, got a job, and you stayed at that job for
Yeah.
decades and
Mm-hmm.
decades because it provided a life for you that you needed,
Yeah.
right? There was no, this is very new with our generations, X and Y, I guess. Those are the
Mm-hmm.
generations,
Yeah.
X and millennials, that we actually are like not staying with companies, and
Mm-hmm.
we're jumping around, and we're starting the side hustles and the businesses and doing all the things sort of like just unconventionally.
Yeah.
And yeah, those are just the first couple of things that came to mind. But there's so many others where it's like
Yeah.
I thought that it was gonna go this one way. And It absolutely did not. Even with my dance career, I had no idea that I would end up like getting a master's in dance and then becoming a dance educator in the way that I was, taught at community colleges, like all over the city of, all over the Dallas Fort Worth metroplex, and then choreographed a ton of theater, which I absolutely loved. Didn't realize I would love that, just and then becoming a dance writer. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
writing for, I starting the workingdancer.com and then that pivoting me into workforce development and then supporting people through their own career pivots. Had no idea that that could have happened.
Mm,
And a lot of those moments, I think what we're talking about here, a lot of those moments were like, what the hell is happening in my life?
mhm.
Where's the money going to come from? I want a better lifestyle than this. There were a lot of moments where I was like, why does it feel so hazy? Why does my career feel like it's not linear? I've got friends who like decided to go to law school, went there, and then
Mhm.
became lawyers and bought houses in their 20s. And, for some reason, my life just always felt like it was lifing. I always chose this, I'm going to follow my heart path. And you know
Mm.
what?
Here we go.
You're right. It's beautiful. I don't know if it's just like following that heart path is just it's a little tougher on purpose, than necessarily a head path. That's not to say that the head path isn't difficult, because I also know people who chose those very specific pathways from college and actually didn't enjoy it and just
Mhm.
stuck through it because it's what they chose.
Yeah.
And, it sounded good and it's a status. And, I don't know how fulfilled they are in this
Mhm.
moment, but still, anyways, I say all of that to say all of it, like you said.
Yeah. All of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know people who I know a lot of people who were classmates of mine or the year before me, year after me, who are not social workers anymore.
Yeah.
I know people who became car salesmen. I know a gang of teachers
Mhm.
with social work degrees. People who just decided that it wasn't for them
Mhm.
anymore. And now more and more you're seeing like kids have the ability to take gap years,
Yeah.
to figure out what it is that they want to do. And I don't know, I want to fight the person who said that at 16 years old you have to know
Yeah.
what you want to do.
And we gotta stop
Um,
asking little kids, like, "What do you wanna be when you grow up?" They
uh,
don't know.
I don't know. Sorry, I
Yeah.
know I know what I saw in the book yesterday, and it's the
Yeah.
freshest thing on my mind.
Yeah.
But all of that to say that you mentioned earlier, like I was doing all of this while I was becoming, right?
Mhm.
And that's what stuck in my mind, like the idea of just learning to go with the flow
Mhm.
is like I'm becoming.
Mhm.
I don't know what that is yet, but giving people the freedom to just be becoming. Um and not to go off on a path of careers, but just in general in life. We always talk about this idea of being a habitual student,
Yeah.
right? And when you graduate, it seems like we dismiss this idea of learning,
Mhm.
further. And you have to then become well, you should have been, I believe, a student of life the entire time. I think what I'm learning to be more grounded in is that I'll never learn everything that I need to learn.
Mm.
That there will be evolution and growth and change and all those things that will forever be a part of my life. And I'm having to learn to not plan for things to be linear, for things to go
Mhm.
in a straight line,
Mhm.
for me to just give myself the freedom to be becoming, and to pivot as I need to pivot, to try.
What's that?
It's from some movie. But anyway,
Okay.
but when you are trying, that is just what it is. Like I'm putting together a formula. We're gonna see if it works. If it doesn't, I go back and I try something else.
Yes, and I think nobody was talking about life in that way. And so
Mhm.
I heard things like, I can also remember the very moment when I was in my youth, like in my teens,
Did you ever
thinking
think
like,
that you would be saying that when
no,
you'd be old enough?
no, I didn't. But I remember the moment when I said, "Why does everybody say life is hard?" You
Mm,
know, my old don't have to work,
yeah.
needs are met, safe in my home with
Hmm.
my family,
What a
not
privilege.
right, privileged life. Like, what
Hmm.
do you mean life is hard? Because that's the only thing people said. And I think now
Hmm.
it's about managing the expectations. Like we have these conversations to normalize like the
Hmm.
truth about life. That's
Yeah.
really what we do here, right? We expose
Hmm.
it and then normalize it. And so I think instead of just saying that life is hard, what I would have felt was more helpful and at some point, maybe not at 15, but what I'm feeling like is more helpful to actually express is it's not linear. You're going to plan things and then things are just going to happen. A family member is going to get sick. Someone's going to pass away. You're going to experience loss in the midst of your planning.
Yeah.
And you're going to need to figure out how to keep moving through it. Try not to
Yeah.
let it take you out. Like if we could have talked about it in that way,
Hmm.
maybe your relationship is going to end and you never thought it would, or whatever the thing is,
Yeah.
just normalizing that's what we mean when we say that life is hard. And then if you can figure out a way to like grow through it, use it for your good, you'll be okay, you know?
Yeah. I'm getting to the point too where the life has. I'm gonna tell you the term that I used to hate the most. You gotta learn to live life on life's terms.
Mm.
I hate it so much because I want to live life on my own terms.
You don't like authority either. So yeah.
Yeah, I generally have a problem with authority, but also I ain't living on nobody's terms but my own.
Mhm.
But then life will humble you.
Uh, my grandmother said something. I was just with her last month, and she said, "Life will grow you up."
Mm,
Oh, and I was like, "Say it again." Like it felt
yeah,
so like to the crux of life.
yeah,
Life will grow you up.
yeah.
Yeah.
And since we own colloquialisms, I remember my dad also saying like, "Pain will teach you where pride won't let you learn."
Mm.
So just I've always been like that. I've been hard headed since I was a little bitty boy,
You're
and
Cancer,
I'm
so.
still don't do that. Don't do me. Don't do me. And we can shut all this down now. No, I was playing. Um, yeah, I've just always wanted to do it my own self way,
Mhm.
and sometimes I can be almost committed to failure by trying to figure out like how much of the wrong thing I can bring into it and still get a correct answer, or just trying to force my will into something
Mm. Mhm.
and making it be what I want it to be when life is just pulling me in a different direction or still has more to show me. But much like the seasons, I've learned like as an older um, young adult,
Mhm.
I'm learning to be more mindful and to do things like to usher in the seasons,
Mhm.
um, and to treat life that same way. Like I welcome in this new season of life. I welcome in this transition. I welcome in, I'm one of both of our favorite times of year for different reasons is the fall. And
Mhm.
I'm so excited that fall is coming for college football, for homecomings, for seeing all my friends, for being a little bit cooler weather. You want to wear more boots and cover ups and
It's
shawls and
so
sweaters and shit.
interesting. Yeah, just to think about that, we like them for very different reasons. You, an extrovert, want like all your people and all the celebrations.
Hmm.
I want cool weather. I want the colors of the leaves. I want to reflect on the things that I need to let go. I have an introverted
Hmm.
appreciation for fall, and you, true to form, are like where all the people, all the celebrations, all the kickers, all
Yes.
the
Where I
kickbacks.
don't have to be sweating.
Yeah, I'm excited about fall too, and
But
sweater dresses and boots.
yeah, all of those things.
Mm.
But I've learned to just appreciate it for different reasons. There was a time I'd be like, oh my God, why is it so cold now? I miss
Mm-mm.
the summer,
Mm-mm.
and then it get to be winter, be like, oh my God,
Mhm.
gotta stay in the house. Then it's so cold you miss summer, so hot you miss winter.
Mhm.
It's so this,
You miss that.
it's spring and now it's raining all the damn time. I
Yeah.
don't want to be outside. And if I can be mindful in the moment and I can learn to appreciate the season that I'm in, not only with the weather, but with everything. To being able now to search for it, even in the midst of going through some particular setback or problem, learning to be able to appreciate the season that I'm in. Most recently, behind this car stuff, and being able to appreciate having partnership where could be like, hey, we're gonna move this money around so this thing could be taken care of. It was a setback. I didn't anticipate having to do that amount of having to lose that amount of money on a car repair,
Mhm.
but being able to zoom out and say I have the level of partnership to where I ain't set back for forever. This is not money that I don't have, right? Between me and my partner, we have enough money to get this thing done, and we're fine.
Mhm.
And when you're eating spam sandwiches,
And
mm,
we can always make more money. Like the money
right?
is yeah. I love what you said about the seasons because that's the essence of this conversation is like
Hmm.
how do you appreciate every season? How do you go with the flow? And that is really hard when you're so invested, right? Especially take our fertility journey, for example.
Yeah.
We said we're going to start saying our journey to parenthood instead. So we're going to reframe that story. Our journey to parenthood, and, like really build up your faith and like put your money into it and your time
Hmm.
into it and your body into it
Hmm.
and then it not happen the way that you planned, yes, we're human beings. So even like
Yeah.
feeling a way about it is okay. And then I think it's like something about trusting the process. And I kind of hate that colloquialism,
Ain't
like
no
trusting
kinda.
the process. And I think it's also because my whole intention for trust is like kick my ass this year.
Hmm.
But it really is that. I hate to say it because it's so cliche, but like, what does it mean and look like to trust the process
Hmm.
in every season, or to know, or even just to know? Maybe you don't have the desire or the will or the strength to trust it just yet, but at least just acknowledging, like, okay, I had this plan. It's not going the way that I planned. This is what like trusting the
Hmm.
process. So I think I'm jumping ahead of myself. Let's talk a little bit about the haze. Like, what's the haze of going with the flow? I think I just
Hmm.
mentioned, like, when you're so invested, you got everything in it, and it's like you're trying to do this, and life is trying to do this, and it's like this gap here. I didn't ask for that.
I don't want it. I don't want it.
Yeah, it hurts. It
Yeah.
hurts a lot of times. I think if I could say that's one
Yeah.
haze.
Um, for me, the haze is like the fruit not looking like what I thought it was going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
So, journey to parenthood, um, was willing to do all the things,
Mm-hmm.
like take my money,
Mm-hmm.
give me all this weight that I've lost.
Mm-hmm.
I'll put it back on to do these fertility meds. I'll do all the things as long as the fruit is a baby,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And the haze for me in this moment, in this season, is having to look for the silver lining, and go into therapy sessions and be able to identify other good things that have happened on you know, on the end of this particular part of our journey to parenthood. Like, we've definitely drawn closer to each other,
Mm-hmm.
have learned how to be more supportive of each other, have been able to reframe some things, to rethink some things, to understand that um, even our language matters.
Mm-hmm.
That we have to say things like the journey to parenthood. We have to trust more.
Mm-hmm.
What trust looks like.
Mm-hmm.
All of these things are things that have been hazing me.
Mm-hmm.
Am I trusting that my higher power is going to do and have us exactly where we need to be? Or am
Mm-hmm.
I trusting him to give me what I want?
Yes, that
Right.
part.
And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I
yeah.
have struggled the most with, and the biggest haze for me has been like the rethinking what the fruit looks like.
Mm,
Is it only good? Is it only the life that I desired if the fruit is the fruit that I wanted? Or
that
is
you
it
picked for
that,
yourself.
right? Is it that it's happening in the way that it should, and maybe God got a different plan? or a different way for me to get there, or it's not supposed to happen when I'm 45 or 46. It will happen in its own time.
That's really powerful. And if I could share something that you shared with me, even, we have always called each other like baby mother and baby father.
Hmm.
And in the wake of, our most recent disappointment, you sort of stopped calling me that. And then after a while, because we've been grieving for a while, y'all, and I
Hmm.
think, we sometimes it feels like we're turning a corner, and then sometimes,
It's
it's
not linear.
it's back.
Right.
But you called me baby mother in a text, and I was like, "Thank you for calling me that." And you said, "We've already birthed some great things, some
Hmm.
beautiful things," and that meant so much to me. But that really speaks to just like rethinking, like reframing. Look
Hmm.
at you doing your work in therapy
Hmm.
and stuff like that. So proud of you, boy. But it really speaks to like, yeah, reframing the thinking. And I
Hmm.
think that's really kind of pulling us into like, how do you navigate it?
Yeah.
I can't, especially in this conversation about life, with any sort of confidence say that I've got anything to offer that is like definitive answer. Like, this is
Yeah.
how you do it. Because we are still on the journey ourselves. We're still figuring it out.
Mm.
I think what I can offer is to just show up. Um, and feel how you feel.
Hmm.
So if you're hurting in this moment, the hurt in this moment, just don't stay there. Don't wallow there.
Yeah, you can't stay.
Move forward in some place. Like feel how you feel when you feel it. Make sure that you have the support that you need to keep like to process through it, to move forward, however, like you get more tools to kind of work through
Hmm.
it. And figure out how to this feels like a really cliche thing to say, like figure out how to dream a new dream or hold on to that one differently. Like you just got to
Hmm.
feel how you feel, get the support that you need, and just figure out how to like take the next step.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't see the path all the way down, but like, okay, what's the next step? We've spent a lot of time recently being like, what is the next step? I think for us, specifically talking about parenthood, it's just been to like heal, and
Yeah.
then we'll go from there.
Yeah. That's the
Like we
biggest thing for
haven't
me.
even, yeah, that is the
Hmm.
step we're on. And then
Yeah.
the rest is TBD.
Yeah. I think for me, even with what you were just saying about the language, I think y'all always hear me say that language matters.
Hmm.
And in that season where I had nothing but like this reckless faith
Hmm.
that we were going to be the proud birth parents of happy, healthy, whole, beautiful brown babies. And that's not to say that that still can't happen, but I lost that faith.
Hmm.
And what I had decided in my grief was that I was not going to give God the pleasure of hearing me pronounce those things over myself and over my household, and over this woman that I've been charged to protect,
Hmm.
and him keep breaking her heart.
Hmm.
And so I went into protective mode with life and with God.
Hmm.
And I'm not going to speak those things that
Yeah.
can't happen for us. And I put up like this wall around and decided that I wasn't going to fight with God this time because I'm more spiritually mature than to try to fight with God because I didn't get what I want. But what I was going to do was like not want it anymore.
Yeah.
And so,
You're gonna shut down that part of your desire,
yeah,
basically.
I'm going to
Yeah.
give him the rest of it
Yeah.
because, I mean, you will do that, won't you, Mr. Provider? I ain't all the way healed, y'all. Still talking trash to God. What is you doing? Also, I'm finding my way back
Yeah.
to, like I said, redefining what the fruit looks like. And for me, even with people who are you can't fake the funk with
Mhm.
healing. Um, and therapy has just been an invaluable tool for me. And I had to be in therapy. Even was running from my therapist for a little while,
Mhm.
because I didn't want to do the work. Right? There's people out here faking like they in therapy and just saying the words and not doing the work, but the work is hard.
Mhm.
And I was ducking that work because I had my own plan. My plan was just like I'm just breaking up with God in that part of my
Mhm.
life. He can have everything else. He can have my tithe. I'm not gonna stop doing, but I will stop pronouncing this thing over myself because what I had convinced myself was like there's a role that I'm playing in breaking my own heart
Mhm.
by continuing to give God this thing that He's saying no to.
Mhm.
right? And I was like, oh man, I ain't finna keep breaking my heart. I wouldn't do it with anybody else, so I'm not gonna do it with God either.
Mhm.
But I'm having to find my way back to whatever faith looks like for me. And also um realize the impact that it has on the person that I love the most. Um, when I don't open myself up to faith, when I don't
Mm.
redefine what the fruit looks like,
Mhm.
when I don't understand that God is not a genie, right? He's not here
Mm.
to for me to rub the bottle and just get what I want. And then I can have this transaction where I'm good to other people and I just get what I want. Life doesn't work that way. God doesn't work that way. Grief doesn't work that way. None of the things. We have seasons. And even in those seasons and in the things that we go through, there's something that we're supposed to be doing. And for to use my I statements, there's something that I'm supposed to be doing. A part of that is the work on this podcast.
Mhm.
And it is not that, again, that we are experts. It is for us to be having a conversation. So somebody who's going through their own journey to parenthood, or their own temporary fallout with God, and maybe that person won't decide that they're leaving the church, or leaving behind relationship with God altogether because they didn't get their way. So if that is my part of the work, then I will still be producing fruit over here no matter what, and it may just not look like what I had hoped that it would look like, or what I wanted it to look like.
Yeah. And then that part is really difficult, is like not just reframing your language, but when we were in church last week, the pastor was preaching about something similar. And it's like when the rug is pulled from under you and like you don't have all the pieces left, like how do you rebuild life with the pieces that you have left? Like how do
Yeah.
you and build the version of life that you didn't even think was going to be your
Hmm.
version to build? It's like those things. We hear stories about people who lost their spouses in their
Hmm.
30s and are like having to figure out how to like raise kids. Nobody
Yeah.
plans any of that.
Yeah.
Nobody
Hmm.
plans any of that. And then you're just having to figure out. I wrote something down, even in just preparing for this conversation, like what could it look like to trust and adjust? Like, what does
Mm.
that even mean? Like, I'm learning, navigating my way through trust and learning that,
Yeah.
I thought one way about trust and maybe wasn't fully trusting myself. Not maybe, wasn't fully trusting myself, wasn't fully trusting God, right?
Hmm.
Um, and and then now here I am, having really tried to grapple with like, this is not what I thought life was going to be.
Yeah.
And then what kind of adjustment can I make uh, as I move forward? And lately it's been like, okay, I'm really taking a look at like how can I live more intentionally? If this is what life is going to be, I don't want to be burnt out. I don't want to be, like I'm going to actually
Hmm.
live my life. And so I think that's another part of it in terms of not being linear. I got sucked into this trap in my 20s and I said I wasn't going to do it again, but I found myself kind of doing it again in a different way. When
Yeah.
I was building my dance career in my 20s in LA, I was grinding like I was laser focused on this thing. So in the toughest season of that part of my life, was working overnight. So from like 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and which is already hard in and of itself. I would maybe sleep for a couple hours, and I had an agent at the time, and then I would go to auditions that could be mid
Hmm.
mornings or afternoons. I might sleep for a hot second and then go to class because you have to be in class. That's where you network. That's where people get to
Hmm.
know you. Some of those same instructors that are teaching the classes were leading the auditions and choreographing for the artists.
Hmm.
So, and I was just on repeat. And then I was doing my own things in the community. I was in a dance crew and we would have our shows and we would have rehearsals. And
Hmm.
so, and then I tried to have, I was in a relationship. I was trying to do all of these things and I just worked myself ragged until I was
Yeah.
in a form of a depression that I didn't recognize I was in, and I was not living life. I wasn't
Hmm.
living. I was just like, let me get to point B. And I think the trusting the process and the journey is about how do you live life as you're trying to move towards the thing that you
Yeah.
want. You know what I mean? And so
Hmm.
I found myself even in this season, like, moving forward in my career and building, community impact through the Love
Yeah.
Haze and my own coaching practice. And then we've got a village we want to like sustain. And then like found myself like you're actually doing it again.
Yeah.
And my therapist, bless her, was like there's something about not enoughness. Like you think you can work your way
Yeah.
to enoughness that I've got to sit with. It's
Yeah.
another conversation for another day. But
Mhm.
anyways, where it started was like, how can you trust and adjust as
Yeah.
a way to navigate?
Yeah. The biggest part for me of that example from church the other day was like when he um, knocked the house down that
Hmm.
the people were building,
Hmm.
and he had like when he pulled the rug from under, he took some of the pieces with him
Mm,
across the stage, and they just started rebuilding.
yeah.
And especially for me as a man, I think we have this thing where we want to have our shit together before we start to go on to the next step. And what if that's not a real place?
Mm,
What if like my duty is to bloom where I am, to build where I am,
yeah.
to start with what I have and then
Hmm.
add on to, or to learn to accept the fact that all the pieces that I had in my mind don't have to be there in order for me to start doing the work.
Hmm.
Um, and that's the transaction part of it that I've had to remove from my relationship with my higher power and my relationship with myself, giving myself permission to continue to um, plow the fields and to build and to do the work like right where I am,
Hmm.
um, and to let that be what my legacy is. And whatever I have, wherever I am, it is all good enough
Yeah.
right now for
It
me
is
to
enough.
start.
Hmm.
It's not that I don't get to start until I get to a certain place. I have to start. That's the expectation of
Hmm.
me. So,
I love that.
mhm.
That's enough. This moment's enough.
So I don't know if we need to say this, but well, yeah, we do. What's the biggest lesson you think you've learned about trusting the process?
I'm still trying to learn what trust is, Charlie. Um, I think the biggest lesson for me is being able to zoom out and say, okay, that this is a process. Like to be able
Mhm,
to see the forest and not just focus on the trees. Do you know what I
mhm,
mean? I can get really focused on this tree and this tree and this tree and this tree. But lately, I've been like, okay, how can I sit and zoom out, be more intentional about this forest? How do I want to navigate through it? I want to be present for each of these trees. And that feels like a very woo woo way to say it, but it's like sort of like not getting consumed with any one step is what I'm trying to
yeah,
say. I'm trying not to get consumed with any one step of the process, but trying to acknowledge that the totality of it is a process and to like try to live through that. Try to
yeah,
like find my life and still thrive and be happy and find joy and peace and forgiveness and healing and love
mhm.
through all of the parts of it. What about you?
I think it's more about learning to be present,
Mhm.
to appreciate where I am in the moment, to find some level of grounding,
Mhm.
to find something to be grounded in as I'm learning and as I'm going through the process, to not allow any one particular emotion or experience to define what that season is for me right now.
Yeah.
Like, we've had some hard stuff happen, but I won't define this as a season of loss for us.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? I don't want to be defined by any one thing that I experience. I want the freedom to give myself the freedom to experience life as it's happening, but to choose to pull joy from it.
I
To
love
choose
that.
to not be sad because and not go anywhere and not take trips because we've had this thing that disrupted our plan.
Mhm.
But if my plan is to have a good life with my wife, then I have to be intentional about not letting that be disrupted because this small thing over here happened.
Mhm.
And understanding that it is indeed a small thing.
Mhm.
It is a disruption to what my plan was, but it should have never been about what my plan was. We
Mm.
can be well intentioned, and have a plan for our lives,
Mhm.
but, the road to hell is paved with good intentions,
Mm.
right? It is not um, that everything is going to go as we plan it. It is, how we respond to those moments that are unplanned for. And if we, you know, just park there and stew and wallow in disappointment, then it will feel like a season of disappointment. And the
Mhm.
next thing that happens that is not favorable will feel like, that season of disappointment is just reiterated, or like I'm just losing in this season.
Mhm.
But some of it for us, when we're in seasons that are not our favorite seasons, or in periods of life when life is not happening the way we want to, um for me and for some of us, it is because we choose to stew in the disappointment,
Yeah.
to say, I'm gonna sit right here, I'm disappointed, so I'm not going anywhere, I'm not going to spend any more money because I had to spend this money on my transmission, so now I need to save. I
Mhm.
don't need to give myself permission to have any more fun, because what if the next thing happens, you know and we choose to rest in our bodies sometimes in like disappointment and sadness and grief, and in those spaces, rather than accepting that that setback has happened, to learn whatever we're supposed to learn from it, and to keep moving, to keep choosing progress, and not to be stuck in places.
I have me reflecting on my own response of this season.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'll have to sit with that a little bit more. That was good stuff. This has been a really good cathartic conversation, quite honestly. What's the vibe? What's the music for this moment?
So my boy Lupe Fiasco,
Mhm.
kick push, and just that whole song, the whole vibe. Of course, he's a skateboarder, and he's kind of breaking down, the art of skateboarding. And he talks about, a kid that's learning how to skateboard, and he fell, but he got back up. And really, the only thing that we can do in life is kick, push, and when we
Coast.
get to an even spot, we can coast. But to appreciate the entirety of like skateboarding and the freedom that it provides and all of those things. And you have to kick when you got to kick, you got to push when you got to push, and when you get a moment to coast, enjoy that, but prepare yourself for when you got to do all of them.
Yeah, I really like too that the the song is a lot about like rejection, like always
Hmm.
being redirected. Like you can't be here, you can't be here, nope, can't be here. But you just keep going to your
Yeah.
point. Like you not ever once in the song is it like there where you keep there's no excuse me, sir, there's no skating here, and you just
Yeah.
stop skating. It's like I'm
Hmm.
gonna keep doing this, but you know, just find my way. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's law. So
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, so if you made it to this point in our conversation, you must like what you hear. So go ahead and
yeah.
like, follow, subscribe, share with your people. We really appreciate. Leave us a comment either if under the episode itself, or you can always reach out to the lovehaze@gmail.com and share with us ideas for other conversations to
Hmm.
unpack. We definitely invite you to subscribe to our weekly word. You heard Scott say earlier in the conversation that
Hmm.
words matter, language matters, and it absolutely does.
Yeah.
And so we invite you to, subscribe to the weekly word. You'll find the link to subscribe in our show notes, and we send resources. We send the episodes directly to your inbox. We've got bars from our music from the
Bars.
moment, and just from insights from our conversations around the community. And so we'd love to share that with you and invite you to join our tribe. And like we always say, life will always present us with a haze, but we have everything that we need within us to navigate through it.
And most importantly, you're not alone.
Mm-mm.
Join us next time, and we're going to take this journey together. Come through. All right,
Bye.
y'all. Peace.
Why'd you take so long to come?